Okay, this is Rebecca Finney, Brittany Litchfield, and Ellen Mork, and we are interviewing Ray Zandstra at the Lowell Historical Museum.
Good afternoon. My name is Raymond Zandstra. I was born September 30th, 1941. What else do we want to know?
So where were you born?
I was born in Grand Rapids on September 30th, 1941.
Okay, and then tell me about your parents.
I'm not sure what you wanted.
Like your mom and your dad and...
We all have a mom and a dad.
Yeah.
And I was raised as a only child until about the age of 10 or 12, somewhere in there, whenever my half-brother was born. My mom was a single parent during World War II, and so consequently I spent a lot of time with grandparents, aunts, uncles. Anybody would be willing to take me in for a period of time because transportation during that period of time was hard to come by, and only mom has to work.
Yeah. Okay, so when did your mom get married?
My mom married my stepdad approximately 1947, which would make me like 6 years old, thereabouts. And so from 6 years of age on through life, that's the only dad I ever knew, and respected him as such and accepted him as such.
So you had a half-brother who was born when you were around 12?
Actually, it was 9, because I was born in 1941, he was born in 1950.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then tell me about your first jobs when you were younger.
Well, one of my jobs as a younger person, I delivered the Grand Rapids Herald, which was a morning publication in Grand Rapids. The Grand Rapids Press was an afternoon publication similar to what it is today. And while in high school, as a teenager, I worked in a car wash. And car washes at that time were not automated like they are today. We washed the cars by hand.
Okay, that was small. And then you went to Godwin Heights?
Correct. I went to Godwin Heights High School and I graduated in 1959. And during that period of time in high school is when I met my wife. And I was probably about age 14 at that time. And having enlisted in the Navy at age 17, we were separated for a while. And this guy would be here when we got married.
Okay, so when did you decided to enlist at 17?
Correct. I went in the U.S. Navy at age 17 and was sworn into the U.S. Navy on July 14th, 1959, which left me approximately 6 weeks between graduation and being sworn into the military. The reason I selected the military were partly because I had not found a direction to go in. So to go to college was not of my choosing at that time. And frankly, I about had it with books and studying for a while. And so I figured, well, I couldn't get hurt in the military necessarily, and so it was peacetime, and I certainly had an opportunity to learn something in the military. And my experience with the military, and it's been proven many times over, is that this changes an individual's personality in that some people would term this that you learn discipline, learn respect, and become a man during that time.
What did your parents think about you joining the Navy?
That was not something that they were totally in favor of, but they also knew that it wouldn't be but a few months later, at age 18, that I would have my own choice and be responsible for myself, and so they weren't going to stop me, from joining the military because they just knew that it was going to happen anyway.
Okay, why did you choose the Navy?
I chose the Navy partly because my my birth father was in the United States Navy, and my stepfather also was in the United States Navy. And as I looked at military and considered military, there were certain things that I did like about the Navy compared to the Army or the Air Force. In the Army and the Air Force and the Marine Corps, you wear a necktie with a closed button shirt. This is not something that I wanted to do. And some of them, they wear what I call a hard hat. It's a rigid hat, where in the Navy, you wear this little Dixie cup hat, and worked just fine for me. So that was basically my selection for that.
Okay. So what happened after you enlisted?
Well, you serve your time in basic training. It's supposed to be a 12 to 14 week course, but you're there 16 weeks generally because you've got processing that has to happen before and after. And they have to find a place for you to go. So it doesn't always happen in one day. There's a lot of people, a lot of assignments, and a lot of billets to be filled. And so consequently, there I was in basic training. From basic training, I was headed to a naval air facility in Sigonella, Sicily, or Malta originally, but ultimately going to end up in Sigonella, Sicily. But when I got these orders to go there, didn't know where I was going, other than I was to follow the directions on my orders, at one step at a time. And I did know that I was going to Europe some way, but didn't know where or why until having almost got there. And I spent a year there in Sicily, had an opportunity to come back to the United States and go to an A school for some formal training. And what I did was I did take that opportunity. I came back and went to a helicopter maintenance school in Memphis, Tennessee, which was another basically 16 weeks. And from there, having graduated there, I was transferred to the West Coast, to San Diego, California, assigned to Helicopter Utility Squadron 1, which had several functions to serve, the most important being plane guard, off aircraft carriers, or air-sea rescue for pilots that were down at sea. And then from there, we were discharged and came home.
Okay, in San Diego, you went through 1 week training operation thing. Can you tell me about that?
That was part of a lot of training. We did a lot of training at our own base. The 1 week that you're referring to is the United States Navy Survivor School. And this is a pretty rigid course where you are taught how to survive off the land in the event that you're down behind enemy lines for some reason, or whatever. They want you to learn how to survive. They also want you to have escape and evasion techniques with regards to not being captured by the enemy. And then that week is concluded by a 24-hour period in a mock prison compound. And during that time, you're interrogated and keeping in compliance with Geneva Conventions, they emphasize strongly that you're only to give your name, rank, and serial number as answers to any question. Other than that, you don't tell them anything. And so consequently, yeah, we went through that, and the significance of that is that it's one of the requirements to becoming an air sea rescue crewman, and many other naval aviation people go through the survivor school for various reasons, not just helicopter people. It's just about anybody that's going to serve anywhere in the world, the United States Navy. And sometimes that particular course is recommended to individuals that are looking for further advancement in rank in the Navy, and so they go to that school.
Okay, can you tell me what specifically they did at the school each day?
Well, if I remember right, the first day we spent on the beach, and we had swimming things to do. They're going to make sure that you know how to swim, and that is combined with staying overnight the first night on the beach, and they don't really aid you in finding food, and they don't provide food. You do what you can, and consequently we wound up with some fish and some lobsters that we had. We built a fire and cooked this into a soup or broth or something, and that was our meal for that day. The second day, well, even part of that day, they take you out in boats. You get out of the boat, and the boat leaves. And this is to familiarize you with what a pilot may go through as if he's has to he's down at sea. And then the helicopters come and pick you up one at a time, bring you back to shore. And that pretty well concludes the first day. Then the next day, you go to a big swimming pool where more swimming techniques are taught to you, and endurance swimming, and how to use your Mae West life vest. And then, of course, they want you to jump off this tower some 15, 16 feet above the water, which is 15, 16 feet from the ground. But when you're up there looking down, it's more like 50 or 60 feet. That's what it feels like. And that's only to help familiarize people who may have to abandon ship someday from an aircraft carrier, which is a long ways to the water. From there, we went on some hiking ventures whereby you were broken into small groups of 5 to 6, 7 people possibly. You were given a contour map of the area that you were in, and you were to find your way as best you can to point B, whatever point B may be, but we were all heading for the same place. And that was like almost a day-long thing. And then from there, I guess there were some more things we did in between, but then we were getting near the end of the week, and that's when we were given this escape and evasion course, whereby we're allowed, or not allowed, but we're just turned loose, trying to get to point B, but the enemy is out there, dressed as the enemy, trying to find you, trying to capture you, and in which case when you are captured, you're taken directly to this prison compound where you are interrogated and go through all kinds of things that the enemy may try to do to you. For example, there's no food, and you're going to ask for food, and there's no medical facilities or supplies, which you're going to ask for medical supplies. And when we were finally given some food, we were told that we couldn't eat the food until everybody's canteen was sterilized. And so consequently, we had this big pot of water, and you can't sterilize it, of course, until the water boils. So you build a fire and you get this hot water going, and they're not going to give you any water to drink either. And hot water is not fun to drink. But anyway, we got the fire and the water hot enough to sterilize our canteens. And then, of course, we were still asking for more water, and they were not going to give us water. You've got water, use the water that you have. Ultimately, and finally, we did. And we were given some small amounts of food. But you have to learn how to share this with everybody, so consequently you end up making this big batch of soup or broth or whatever. And there are simulated air raids, and then one by one, and sometimes maybe more than one. It takes 3 or 4 at a time to interrogation. And your interrogation is, it varies in length. If they're pretty well convinced that you're not going to give them any more than your name, rank, and serial number, your interrogation period may last only 15-20 minutes. But if you do give them some information, of course, they're going to pump you for more, and you're going to be there longer. And the more you tell them, the longer you're going to be there.
Well, what kind of information could you tell them, considering
you can only tell them your name, rank, and serial number. And they want to know about your brothers, your sisters, your mom. They want to know something about your background, because they know, the enemy knows, that once they can get you to answer something, they're going to get more. It's not going to happen with just, they don't really care if you got a brother or a sister.
Yeah.
But they know that once they can get you talking, they're going to get to the objective that they're trying to get to. And I think ultimately what they're looking for is how big was the task force that you were assigned to? What ship were you on? What was the motivation of this ship? Where were they going? Who were they after? How many airplanes did they have? All this kind of stuff. So it's emphasized strongly to you that you give your name, rank, and serial number, and that's it.
So how many times do people get interrogated? Just once? Or?
Some were more than once, and that may be because maybe somebody did give some information. We did have a black person in our group, and the ratio happened to be about 1 out of 125. And I know that this individual was interrogated for long periods of time and was also interrogated at least a dozen times. But they knew that because that was a minority individual, that when and if he is in a war or conflict, those are the people that are going to go after. And they pick on him. They happen to, the enemy pinned a nickname on this guy. I guess I didn't mention this before, but they pinned the name of Elvis on him. And so when the enemy came to the main gate of the prison compound, the first thing that you hear is, "Where's Elvis? We want to talk to Elvis." And we tried to protect him and say that he was sick, he couldn't go out or whatever. They weren't buying it. Elvis was going out for another interrogation, and the guy did remarkably well. He was a superb athlete and very well conditioned and quite intelligent, and so he knew how to handle himself. And maybe he was able to keep in mind that this was a training exercise. This was not for real, but you didn't have to wander far from reality to find out or to experience it. This is close to real, and it was quite an experience.
Did they get physical on the interrogation room?
Yes, they were. Physical to the extent that they might kick a chair out from underneath you, or they may hit you with something, either with their hands or fists, or maybe the butt of a gun. Up to the extent that they are instructed that they're really not supposed to draw blood. But it can get pretty rough. And, you take an individual that's been out on a survival course for a week and you haven't had much to eat, they know that. They know that you're psychologically, you're just about exhausted. Physically, you're about exhausted. And so they're going to try to find out who your sister is, because they know they're going to get more.
So did everyone make it through, or did people get ill? Or?
We had several people, several being like 6, 8, 10, I forget what it was, that ended up getting heat exhaustion, and they had to, because it was so hot. We were in the desert. The compound's in the desert. They had to stop the exercise and get these people removed from the compound, because they had finally sent for some helicopters, because they knew that these people were critical. And so helicopters came and picked these people up and took them back to the Naval Hospital in San Diego, whereby they recovered. But it was close. They wouldn't have been out there much longer, and they wouldn't have made it. So it was close, but yep, they got through it.
Okay, can you describe to me your days at Sicily and what it was like to be overseas?
Well, in Sicily, when I went to Europe initially, I was to go to Evasion Special 201, which Evasion is an abbreviation for Fleet Air Support Squadron. But having gotten to Malta, they were well in the process of decommissioning that air base, and they were moving to Sicily. And so rather than even get set up to live in Malta, they sent a small contingent of us up to Sicily to oversee the construction of the base, because it was supposed to have been done and it wasn't done. And NATO required that Sicilian civilians had to perform more than 50% of the work there, and it just wasn't done. These people don't work real hard, or fast. But got there, and slowly but surely, the base got built. There were parts of it that were done when we got there, but there were also parts that were not done. There was the barracks, for example, where we would sleep and live most of the time, were not done. So we ended up sleeping on desks in the administration office until those barracks were done. And on that base, because the only thing that the Sicilians knew about Americans were that they marched through there during the Second World War, and with very little resistance. So the occupation of Sicily was not that great and that long. So because Sicilians really didn't know that much about Americans, we were not allowed to wear uniforms for the first period of several months. We got our supplies from the nearby town, being Catania, Sicily. Drove there by truck and did our grocery shopping, is what it really amounted to. We ate outdoors a lot of the time. the civilians recognized, well, they didn't recognize Americans, but their culture belief was that anybody in uniform that lived behind a fence, all military facilities are fenced in, or people that had tattoos were, usually the enemy. They were not accepted in their culture. An interesting thing about Italian Sicilian culture is that your class of living or standard of living, the further north you live, the higher class people you are, and the further south you live, the lower class you are. Well, Sicily happens to be south of Italy, so this is so-called low-class people. Sicilians didn't necessarily see it that way, but that's the way the Italian culture saw it that way. And basically, Sicilians are Italians. They speak Italian and live Italian. And so, because we were Americans with tattoos, living behind fences, and wore uniforms, they didn't like us very well. They really didn't want us there. But this was an arrangement with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and this base in Sicily was an air facility, and it was strategic to the United States to have one there. It's basically right in the middle of the Mediterranean, and they had to have it, and so we were there. Plus, it provided jobs, a lot of jobs for Sicilian civilians, and they helped cook, they helped clean, they helped build, they helped lawn care. We provided jobs to a lot of Sicilians, and
So what were your responsibilities on the base in Sicily?
in Sicily, aircraft maintenance primarily, security to some extent. Aircraft maintenance being, just like we today maintain the engines in our car, we had to maintain engines in the aircraft. And if the engines, for one reason or another, had to be changed, we would change those engines. And then after they're taken out of the aircraft, of course, we rebuild them and then get ready for the next engine change. If there happened to be one, it would have to be done. The ship's company at Sicily, ship's company being people that are stationed there permanently, we had 3 aircraft, and of different kinds. There was like anyway, 2-engine aircraft that would carry 40 people approximately. We had a twin-engine Beechcraft Bonanza, and we had a seaplane. And so those were our responsibility to take care of those. At any other given time, there might be 50 aircraft there. And these would be from various squadrons in the United States that would come there for short periods of time, short periods being 4 to 6 weeks, and they would rotate back and forth to the United States. And they flew, those people flew missions of various kinds. Reconnaissance, they might be taking pictures, who knows. They might be doing sonar work. They did a lot of things. They were patrol squadrons is basically what they were called.
Okay, and then how did you keep in contact with your family being so far away from home?
Well, the only method we really had, basically by writing, a letter back and forth. I wasn't real prompt at writing letters. Tried to do at least once a week. And your letters didn't want to synchronize with life, so to speak, because they usually took 7 to 10 days coming and going. And, so consequently, when you would get news from home, it was basically history at that point. I think at Christmas time, that one year that I was there, I wanted to call home. And so I went to a hotel in Catania. And what you would do there is you get a hold of an operator, and the operator would place the call for you. And they would have you stay there so that you could take your call when the connection was made. And this would take anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to have this phone call placed back home. And I don't know what the cost was, but I know that we didn't talk on the phone home. 2 or 3 minutes was about the extent of your phone call. And I know that it was, really expensive. Uncle Sam's not going to pay for your phone call. So there was no point. In fact, I don't even think our line, our phones might have, no, they were not hooked up to civilian phones. Ours was internal within the base itself and connected to the airfield, but that's the only places we ever talked to was back and forth.
So did you ever receive care packages or anything like that?
Oh, my aunt would send me what might be termed care packages, and that'd be the typical gum and homemade cookies and fudge and maybe a cake sometimes, or special kinds of baked goods, cinnamon rolls and those kinds of things. And if you were lucky, you would get those things in about a week's time. And they arrived, by air, only if the aircraft had space available to bring packages. If there wasn't, they were stuck in a cargo container and they were brought over by ship, in which case your packages didn't come for 30, 40 days. Some of your stuff was not all that good when you got it, but still you were thankful to get something from home.
We can get a shot of this picture of the base. I'd like to have you explain what was on the base. Let's see it in there.
This is an aerial view of NAF Sigonella, which is a military base in Sicily. These things that you see here are officer housing. The officers were allowed to bring their families there, and so they would live on the base. These over here are enlisted men's housing for those who were eligible to bring their families over to live with them. This is where the bachelor officers lived. These 3 buildings are enlisted men's barracks. There were 3-story tall barracks. The main entrance was right here. The airfield was some 5 miles this way.
Which barrack did you stay in?
I lived in this end of this end barracks right here, which happened to overlook some olive orchards out here. This entire base is on the very beginning of the foothills of Mount Etna. Mount Etna being one of the largest active volcanoes in the world. This being in the middle, this was pretty much in here. You'd have like the chapel and the enlisted men's club and the theater and school for the kids.
Okay, very cool. Thank you. After you left Sicily, where did you go? You went to San Diego after that? Or?
Yes, after Sicily, I went back to the United States to school at the helicopter maintenance, helicopter engine school. And from there I was assigned to Helicopter Utility Squadron 1 in San Diego, California. Actually, it was the town was called Imperial Beach, California, which is south of San Diego, and literally right on the American-Mexican border. It happened to be a small air base. In fact, the only aircraft at this base were helicopters. Some 5-6 miles down the road was this airfield, they call it North Island in San Diego, and that was a very large air base. In between our little air station, air base, and North Island Naval Base is where the Navy SEALs train. And their training sometime coincided with our training. You know, we would help them, and there wasn't much really they could do for us, but they would have operations whereby they would need to be picked up by a helicopter, so that they were familiar with that aspect too, because Navy SEALs certainly are going to get into some pretty tough spots. And that Navy SEAL program is kind of an interesting thing for those that don't know. They'll start out with a group of about 100 people, and in their training, being 3 to 4 months long, if they get 8 people to graduate, that's pretty much the norm. The very first week, they'll lose half of that group. It's pretty rigid, pretty tough.
Now, at San Diego, or outside of San Diego, what were you responsible for at that base?
At Imperial Beach, at the helicopter base I was assigned to, I ended up being the training petty officer for Helicopter Utility Squadron 1. Any air sea rescue crewman, or any individual that wants to be an air sea rescue crewman, goes through a pretty rigid training course involving swimming, exercises. They're also trained on a particular aircraft, a helicopter that probably they will deploy it on or with aboard an aircraft carrier or to another air station, probably in the Pacific somewheres. We had a permanent detachment in Atsugi, Japan, where after our people were trained, they would go there for approximately a year's time and rotated on an annual basis with other people coming and going. Basically, just my job there was, to schedule these people to go through their training exercises, their classes, and their assignments as to which crews they were going to be on. These deployment things are referred to as cruises, not crews in the sense that we know a cruise. But, they are different lengths of time. For example, if an individual would volunteer or sign up to go to a North Pac or a South Pac cruise, those were usually around 3 months. And North Pac and South Pac is the North Pole and the South Pole. And interesting thing about those is those are, to my knowledge, those cruises or experiences in the Navy is the only place you're allowed to grow a beard. You don't have to shave while you're on those. Other cruises would vary in length from 4 months up to 8, 9, 10 months. And most of these would be aboard aircraft carriers in the Pacific Fleet. And they would, what their job there is on these things is they're required to fly. Helicopters are required to fly plane guard during takeoff and landings of jet aircraft, or any aircraft really, but jet aircraft. And you have to have a helicopter in the air before you can launch any planes, and after they've completed their mission, you have to have a helicopter in the air when they're landing, coming back from their mission. So that's pretty much, my responsibilities.
Did you go home on the weekends or visit?
Not when I was in San Diego. When I was in a school command in Memphis, Tennessee, about every other weekend, I would travel that distance from Memphis, Tennessee to Grand Rapids, which was about a 14-hour ride one way and a 14-hour ride the other way, which you have to wonder, how much weekend was there left? But, if you had any opportunity you had to go home, at least I would try it, and I did.
So then when were you discharged from the Navy?
I was discharged, well, my tour of duty in the Navy is what is referred to in the Navy as a minority enlistment. And a minority enlistment is when you are sworn into the Navy at 17 years of age, you get out, or you're discharged from the Navy one day before you turn 21. And that day happened to be on a Saturday, so I was discharged 2 days before I turned 21. That was on the 28th day of September, 1962. And I had everything packed and ready to go, and departed that base at approximately noon on that Friday, and can't say that I drove straight through, but I drove 20-hour days from San Diego to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Left at noon on Friday and arrived in Grand Rapids at about 9 p.m. on Sunday. And that's about 2,500 miles. Long trip. Interesting thing about that discharge and trip, the following week I wanted to contact a friend of mine from the helicopter squadron, and I called his house in Hammond, Indiana, and his mom answered, and I asked for him. She said, well, he's not home yet. And I said, well, when will he be there? No, he didn't get out of the Navy. He was supposed to get out on Monday after my Friday discharge. And come to find out, because of what was known then or now involving Cuba, was what we know as the Bay of Pigs. And so consequently, this friend of mine did not get discharged from the Navy until after Christmas of that year. And I missed that by 1 day, 2 days, however you want to look at it, but at least my enlistment was not extended. And when they extended those people's enlistments at that time, there was nobody in the Navy getting discharged. They were extended indefinitely because we didn't know if we were not going to go to war with Russia. Nobody knew for sure what was really going to happen, but probably President Kennedy's fast talking comes out of that. I don't really know, but that would be my guess.
So you were stationed during the Cold War?
Yes.
During all of the peacetime, but
I would call it Cold War periods of time. At least there was not a war going on. there were things going on in the world that most of us were not aware of. And I guess my example or my reference to that is that somewheres in about the early 1970s, the United States government issued Vietnam bonuses for people that served in the military in what they call the Vietnam era. Well, I was eligible for a bonus because I served in the military during the Vietnam era. And frankly, while I was in the service, I'd never heard of Vietnam. But it was there, and it politically was being fought one way or another. Not sure what it was or why it was, but it was happening.
Okay. So what did you do after you were discharged?
Well, I came home, and I was married at the time, and my wife was expecting my first daughter. And so, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Well, I still wasn't of a mind to go to college. Plus, I had a family to support. So you have to start looking for a job. And I started looking for a job, but it had always been stressed strongly to me that we would like you to have gone to college because we didn't want to see you ever having to work in a factory. And so with that mindset, I was looking for anything that was not in a factory. I did have some drafting courses in high school, and in reading the want ads, I see a position available for a person with drafting capabilities, and I applied for the job and got the job, and worked for a short period of time for, at that time it was the Fred F. Johnson Map Company, and today is the Metrographic Arts Map Company. And they draw and sell maps of cities. Grand Rapids, Flint, Columbus, Muskegon, Kalamazoo, Lansing. And I worked for them for, I don't know, a year and a half, something like that. And then an opportunity came for me to go to work for a civil engineering surveying company in Grand Rapids. And I elected to take that position because, one, it paid more money, and it looked to have more of a future than just drawing city maps every day. So I took the job with them, worked there for approximately 10 years, left there and went to work for another engineering surveying company, and spent 15 years working with them. Ended up being the head of their surveying department. And then one of the engineers that was on staff at the same company decided that he didn't like it there and he wanted to leave. And he had entertained starting his own business, but he wasn't going to do it by himself. And if I wouldn't go with him to form the company, he was going to seek employment elsewhere. Well, after some talking and consideration, and at that time of life, being a single person in life, felt I had nothing to lose. And so we did. We started our own company. Our first year and a half was, our office was upstairs in my home on King Street here in Lowell. We were in business for 18 years, together, that is. That company still exists. Their offices are in Granville. But I was fortunate enough to have retired on September 30th of last year. And so here I am.
Now, how many children do you have?
I have 3 daughters. My oldest daughter must be 45 now, close to 45. Her name is Raina, R-A-Y-N-A. Obviously, she was named after her father. My second daughter is Wendy. Wendy was born 4 years after her sister. And then my third daughter is Shelby. And Shelby is 10 years younger than the oldest daughter. And so that's what I have. 3 daughters.
3 daughters, and you have a married and grandkids?
I have 5 grandchildren.
Wow.
Because these are girls and they marry and their name changes, there's nobody to carry on my name of Zandstra, except I have a grandson that was born, and his name is Caleb, and his name is Caleb Zandstra. And so Caleb will carry on the Zandstra name, and he's the only one that will do that. Our family has always been in the Grand Rapids area until just the last few years. My oldest daughter and her husband and family are moving this week from Columbus, Ohio to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is a job transfer. Not something she's really fond of, but you go where your job goes and you go where your family goes. My second daughter still lives in Grand Rapids, but was married last year, and her husband lives in Mobile, Alabama. And she has some desires and accomplishments she wants to make in Grand Rapids before she commits to go to Mobile, Alabama. Basically what she does is she sells condominiums, and she has 3 rather large condominium projects that she wants to sell out. Once those are sold out, she's moving to Alabama. And my youngest daughter has her home up for sale right now in Lowell, and she's looking to move elsewhere, and I'm not sure where she's moving.
Okay, so now you're just retired and enjoying life?
Yes, I am.
All right.
And for those that are not retired, I always tell them I recommend it strongly.
All right, thank you so much, Ray, for coming.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure and an honor.
The following oral military history project is a series of documentaries in association with the Lowell area men and women who proudly served and sacrificed part of their lives to preserve the opportunities for all of us to build our businesses and raise our families under a blanket of freedom. For reservations and more information, contact the Lowell Area Historical Museum at 616-897-7688.